Right.
You have continued,
Since
Vice.
we want to expedite and move on to the next witness, I would just like for the secretary to just go down on all of those items that are reflected in the spreadsheet that she gave us, and just tell us which ones are up to date, about we're current on, and which ones are we not current on. Starting with the workman's comp, just go down the line.
What you have here, workman's comp, we paid in full. Retirement pension, there was no payment in 2011 and 12, but we are current through that time. Poker revenue is current. Hotel occupancy and container tax, as I mentioned earlier, when I started out, we were behind in payments and we're catching up, but we've been making payments on a regular basis. The only time we stopped making payments was during the bankruptcy proceeding. Judicial building, that's a whole other issue. The law does not provide for enough collections to cover the cost of the loan that is owed on that building. So there's a need to look at that in a separate instance.
Oh, can you just stop right there?
Okay.
When you say the law does not provide enough money for that building to be paid on, what does that mean?
Collections typically don't cover the monthly payment that's owed on the loan. What happens is every month when we collect from the various fees that are charged, we remit that to the to the retirement fund as payment on the judicial building.
But we don't need the legislature to appropriate the money for that, do we?
No, but there is a need to look at the fees that are being charged and so on to cover payment. There never has been enough collection to cover a single payment, if I'm not mistaken.
The employer's contribution?
Employer contribution, we're up to date with federal. All federal employer and employee contributions have been remitted. As far as local funds go, what you see here factors in the various reductions that have been introduced by law, not by actuary. So there are payments that need to be made. They're not always timely, but they are made.
Every year. And then the employee contribution?
Employee contribution is always up to date because we deduct from employees, so that always is remitted right away.
So it's only the employer's contribution that's an issue here.
Yes.
You're saying that for the employer's contribution, are we talking about appropriation in place? I mean, we have to wait for the legislature to appropriate?
Typically, the employer contribution covers the amount that the government is supposed to pay every 2 weeks as part of the payroll, as they're shared for every employee's retirement, future retirement.
When you get appropriation going in and set aside for the retirement fund, where does that money go to catch up on whatever is in arrears with regards to what we owe the retirement fund, or where does the money go to? Where do you apply it first to?
My focus has always been staying current. One of the issues that we ran into in 2011 was the severe reduction in revenue. I believe at the time we were still on the quarterly BGR payments, so typically money would come in only once every 3 months.
So if we were talking about that particular fiscal year, let's say fiscal year 2011, the employer's contribution that is being remitted would go first to keep us current for that fiscal year, and whatever is over and on top of that amount will go over to to the whatever is the payable, or we owe the retirement fund, the debt?
Yes. One of the things to point out though for 2011 is because we had such limited revenue, we had 3 key areas that absorbed a lot of our revenue, and that was our utility bills, Medicaid, and medical referral. And the hospital, of course, is factored into all of that. So the money from 2011 went first to those 4 areas. And
Can you go over them again?
most of our money in 2011 as a government went to CUC, CHC, medical referral, and Medicaid. That's where most of our money went. That is the reason why we had delayed payrolls. That is the reason why we had to cut costs and go into austerity.
But we still remitted $3,372,795.
We actually remitted more in other fiscal years because we made some back payments. We were attempting to keep up with the payment plan that was set for us by the courts, but it was very difficult given the emergencies and the crises we faced that year.
So as it stands now, just how much more do we need to remit to catch up in terms of the employer's contribution?
That's going to take a little more time to answer, just because we need to look at how many employees we need to pay for. With the employees that have withdrawn from the DB plan, we need to get some concrete numbers and do a little more analysis. The actuary report that is coming out later in the month should help answer that question.
Let me just take you back just a little, maybe just go very quickly, because you're saying we are paying all the fiscal years, and I think the years reflected here on the spreadsheet are by fiscal for each fiscal year. If you're looking at the employer's contribution for 2006, like the current, which of those years are already up to date?
I can't answer that question at this time, just because this is only the local funds. This doesn't include the federal funds. With the short time frame I was given, I wasn't able to complete that analysis.
All right, so whenever you receive, you're making our employer's contribution, you would try to first take care of the prior years and then the current, or is it the current and then whatever is the surplus, you will bring it over or post it to the prior fiscal years? Is that what you're doing?
We pay current, and if there's anything available, we try to pay past due. Unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of revenue to make any significant change in that area, but we do try to chip away at the debt that we owe.
Okay, I think I'll yield for now. I guess my question is, we are making payments. Even with the economic turmoil that we are in, we are making payments.
Yes, we are. There have been several instances where I've been asked if I'm not making payments at all, and that's never been true. Payments have been going. It's just a matter of if they're timely or not. And given the emergencies that we face, that can delay the payments to retirement fund, but we are paying.
So as a witness to this article, would you say that the governor is neglectful? Let me just clarify it a little bit and give you a little background of what I'm talking about. We are in economic crisis. We have all kinds of payables to make, obligations to keep up with, yet there are payments that are being reflected, because the impression that I'm getting is there are no payments being remitted on the employer's contribution. So because of that, I'm asking if, despite all of this, we're making efforts to make payments, do you still call that neglectful?
I don't think anyone who held the position of governor would be able to make timely payments on everything, given the financial crisis we're facing. We have so many emergencies, and we've seen significant drops in revenue. The drop to 102, I believe, is the lowest the Commonwealth has ever dropped to. And just keeping a government operating and functional, I consider it a miracle, actually. I don't know how we did it. But working with 102, there's only so much we can do. And a lot of the times when it came down to making decisions as secretary, I didn't even have to look at a budget. It was whatever was in the bank account. The government is living paycheck to paycheck. So as we collect taxes, that's all we have available for us to use. We have to be very careful with the money we collect. We don't have a magic reserve. I'm not sitting on any funds and not paying things. All I have is that 102 over the last 2 years to work with. And I think, in my personal opinion, we did the best that we could with what we had.
Thank you, Mrs. Chairman. Thank you.
Any other member? Okay, I only have one. Ms. Larson, I'm comparing your spreadsheet, your breakdown with retirements, and for the most part it is close. It's off by in some cases less than $1 million. We can't factor in 2006 and 2007 simply because it was during those 2 years that the Public Law 15-15 came into play, which suspended the remittance of the employer contribution to the retirement fund, so I'm not even going to touch on that. 2008, the figures, your figures and retirement's figures are the same to the penny. 2009 is where we see a rather big discrepancy. Your figures show you remitted 7,168,475. Retirement's report says they only received 4.4 million. In 2010, retirement fund actually shows that they receive more than what finance claims they remitted. Your figure shows you remitted 7.1 million. Retirement's figure show they received 9.4. So if we may have overpaid, or I don't know why that is, and perhaps you may be able to explain why. In 2011, it's about $1 million difference. But on the positive side, this is retirement fund figures showing that they received $1 million more than what finance reports was remitted. So if there's any errors here, we're hoping that this would be the kind of errors would show that they're actually receive more than what was what your figures are. But anyway, can we go? Do you know why in fiscal year 2009 there's about almost $3 million, I believe, difference between your figures and the retirement funds figures?
I'm going to guess that that is what I was referring to earlier when we talk about the payments being applied to different fiscal years. What you're seeing here on my spreadsheet is the actual transfer of the cash and when we issue the check. But that doesn't necessarily mean the payment applied to that fiscal year. And I think that's the discrepancy we're seeing, because some of the payments are applied to prior fiscal years and so on.
And that is consistent with what you said earlier, that it was applied to either 2008 or 2009. I clarified that it couldn't be 2008 since your figures is consistent with retirement's figures. So what you're saying is that finance may have remitted 7.1 million, but a portion of what you remitted was applied to a previous or another fiscal year. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I have no further questions. Members, before I dismiss the witness, any further questions? Okay, if not, Ms. Larissa, we want to thank you for your hard work, and especially under the short notice to be able to compile and summarize the data for us and for your cooperation. We thank you, and as I said in the past, we don't anticipate asking you to return, but we will dismiss you, and in the event the committee feels they need to do so, you will be given ample notice. With that, again, thank you, and council also thank you.
Thank you.
You are dismissed.